recording. So let me do recap. Like previous thing anyhow, it's not required since we did set up for other people. Now, so here so this is our listener component, HTTP listener, and this is our, let's say, logger component, any other component, and this is the third component. Okay, we have source that is HTTP listener, and there we are going to use HTTP connector, and these are the component. Okay, so yesterday we seen what is connector. Whenever you want to connect with any external system, okay, you need like you need connector. It can be Salesforce connector, database connector, JMS connector, file connector, FTP connector. Okay. So based on the system, you need some connector to connect. Okay. Now, if you are developing any REST API, so if you are exposing your API to as a REST API, or if you are consuming any REST API, then you need HTTP connector. Okay. So here I want to expose my API as a REST API, so I will use HTTP connector. HTTP listener connector, or you can say HTTP connector is the operation. So for each connector, there will be multiple operations. So we are going to use listener operation. Okay. Then what will happen? Someone will call this endpoint. Okay. Someone will make request to this. Now this will pass that request to this component. Okay. Once this will complete the processing, this will pass the request to this one. And once everything is done, this will pass response back to this one, and this will send response back. Okay. So whenever request will come to HTTP listener, one thing it will do, it will create a mule message. Okay. So this is very important thing, mule message. It contains two parts. Okay, mule message. Or no, not mule message. You can say it create the event. Just 1 minute. For going to mule message, the bigger chunk is known as event, mule event. Sometime in interview they will ask, okay, what is the structure of mule event? Okay, so it will create the mule event, and mule event majorly it has two parts. One is message, and second one is variable. Okay. So whenever request will come to Mulesoft, event will be created, and this mule event will rotate from one component to another component. Here, mule event will come. Based on this processing, this mule event will be updated. Then it will go to here. Based on this processing, this mule event will be updated. Okay. Now, what mule event contains? It contains majorly two parts, message and variable. Now, message further is divided into two parts. One is payload, and then attribute. Okay. Now attributes is again divided into three parts. First is header, then second one is query parameter, okay. So this is the structure of Mulesoft, and many interview they will ask. Now let's understand in detail of this mule batch, mule event. So first thing we will discuss about the variable. Can anyone tell me what is the purpose of variable? What variable do?
It is used to store data.
Yes, but what is like what kind of data and why we store this?
Is it intermediate data?
Intermediate data, you can say.
For feature requests or reuse.
So variable is a storage to hold the data. Okay, it's not intermediate or temporary data. Till the application will run, okay, till the transaction will run, this variable will be active. Whatever data you will store inside the variable, that variable data will be there. Okay. So variable provides us storage whenever we are doing any kind of processing. It provides us storage where we can hold the data. It's not like temporary hold or something. Till the lifetime or life cycle of that processing or transaction, that data will be there. So variable is storage hold data. Okay. So many times what will happen? Some data will be generated within the processing, some data will be generated, and we need to hold that data somewhere for further processing. So at that time, you will create the variable. Everyone clear with this? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Next, payload. So payload contains the processing data. So whatever data you want for processing purpose, let's say you want to do customer registration. So what will be processing data there? Customer name, email, mobile address, password, username, all those kind of data will be processing data whenever you want to create the customer. Whenever you want to retrieve the customer information, their name, email, or whenever you want to retrieve the employee salary, then their salary amount, month they did the transaction and all. So those kind of detail will be processing the data. So whenever you want to store the processing data, you will use the payload. So we store the processing data. Okay. Now header. Inside header, what we do? We store all the metadata. Metadata means data about data. So what all things can be metadata? Let's say transaction ID. So whenever you are doing any transaction, you are creating one new ID. That is transaction ID. Okay. So that transaction ID will be stored inside the header. But uh, like calling any API, you are passing some security related information like user ID and password. So those kind of data we don't use for processing purpose. This is supporting data of our actual data. So that's why we told that as a metadata. Okay. So if we want to store any metadata information, then we store inside the header. Okay. Header contains the metadata. And then query parameter. So query parameter we use whenever we have any filter condition. Let's say I I want to develop one API which will retrieve the customer information. So let's say we want to retrieve any customer information where customer age should be more than 60 years or customer age should be less than 18 years, or we want to retrieve some employee detail where employee salary is more than 50,000. So here what we are doing, we are passing some filter condition. Salary should be greater than this, age should be less than this. So what we are doing, we have list of result. Out of those result, we are filtering result based on some conditions. Okay, based on some filters. So if we have some filter condition that we will put inside the query parameter. Okay. So query parameter we use to put filter condition. Then we have URI parameter. URI parameter we use for unique identifier. Okay. Let's say I want to retrieve the customer based on the customer ID. I want to retrieve the customer based on the you can say this I want to retrieve the student based on their registration number. I want to retrieve the employee based on their employee ID. So these are the unique identifier for each record or for each data. So if we are passing the unique identifier, then we will pass inside the URI parameter. So this is the structure of like mule event. So what kind of data will be stored where? This is the structure. It's not like you must need to pass that data in that particular field, or you can say particular place. Okay. You can pass filter condition inside payload also. Technically, it's possible, but as per API governance, okay, that is not correct. So you should follow API governance. Technically, it will work if you will pass filter condition inside the payload. Still, your API will work and you will able to do things. But if someone will consume your API, for them it will create confusion. As I mentioned last time also, you are building your home, okay, and you are like you plan to use window for your entry and exit. Okay, it's not like people cannot come through window. They can come, but that will create some kind of inconvenience for them. Okay. Since we use door for entry and exit, everyone is having of that habit, but you are creating your unique home. Might be you are comfortable, but other people will not be comfortable. So same way, whenever you are developing your API, technically you can do many things, but if you will not follow the API governance, you might be comfortable, but other people will not be comfortable. And for whom you are creating this API, definitely you are creating this API for other consumer. And if they are not comfortable, might be they will not use your API. Okay, so you should develop your API. It should be more user friendly. It should follow all the standards and all. So it will be easy to use for other. Let me know if anyone has any query. Otherwise, we are good with this concept. One more thing I will add here, but till this point, everyone is good with this. Fine. So next part I will explain. I told you last time, like when we were developing our API. So this set payload, this is set payload component. What it will do? It will configure data inside this payload. Okay, that component will set data inside this payload. Same way, we have other component also to set data inside this, to set data inside this. So here, this component we will use to adjust or alter the data what we have here. Okay, here we will have something. Once we will do processing, this data might be updated or might be same also. Okay, so last time I mentioned we'll use set payload, and whatever set payload data will be there, that data will be response of this API. Okay, if you go here, so here you can see payload. Okay, so whatever data we will have inside this payload, that data will be response of our API. So how we decide this? So to check that, go to listener and go to response. Okay, now here you can see we have, this is the success response body and this is the error response body. Okay, let's discuss about success response only. So what will be response body of that API? Whenever this API will send response, this listener will send response. What will be response data inside the body payload? Okay, so we are defining whatever payload will be there, last payload will be there, that payload will be response of this API. If you want, you can change this to any variable. If you want, you can change this with any hard-coded data also. here we are defining, so whatever payload will be there, okay, whatever final payload will be there, that payload will be response of this API. Okay, same thing, you can control the header also and status code also. If you are not defining any status code, by default it will take 200. In case of success response, by default status code will be 200. Okay, now what is status code? And maybe many people you like know this and many people don't know. So whenever you are defining any REST API, okay, someone will call your API. So your API will return some status code, and that is mandatory thing. Okay. So there are multiple status code for different scenario. Okay. So last time we tested, so you can see status code is 200. 200 means success. Okay. So whenever you will see 200, that means success status code. So like that, we have different status code like 400, 401, 500, 201. Okay, so there are multiple series of this status code, and sometime in interview they will ask, what is the meaning of 200? What is the meaning of 201? So 200 means success response. 201 means resource created. Let's say you are developing any REST API, and that API will create new resource. And if resource is created successfully, then you will send 200. Then 400. If you are calling if someone is calling your API with bad data, then your API will send 400 error. Then we have 401. If your API someone is calling with invalid credential like user ID and password, your API is secured with basic authentication. And if someone is calling with invalid user ID and password, then in that case it will return 401. Okay. So like that, we have different error code you can explore on internet. Okay. So you can just search for HTTP error code. Two hundred, 201, 202, 203, 4, 5, like that. Then 300 series, then 400 series, then 500 series. But all of them are not, sorry, all of them are not frequently used. So I will tell you few, like as I mentioned, like 200, 201, 400, 401, 403, 404, 405, 500. Okay, these are frequently used. Slowly, like while working, you will see this kind of error code and you will understand what all you need to know. Okay, but sometime in interview they will ask. Okay, so for today we are good. Let me know if anyone has any query. Otherwise, we can end this meeting for today.